Three, two, one. You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, marketing, growth strategy, staff, clients, babies, marriage. I'm Christina. This is Peter, and we are the founders and leaders of CIPR Communications. And I suppose that we should add tourism to that list for the next couple episodes.
Yes. Well, we're continuing our series on value of tourism, and I think we're talking about what might be my favorite part of the strategy or our approach that we like to use with clients, which is what's your why? The most important question to any initiative. Why are you doing it? Why does it matter? What is your why? Christina, what is your why?
What is my why? Well, I think I'm still figuring out what my own personal why is.
Oh, good. Mine is, why not? No, I'm just kidding.
That's actually my favorite thing to hear on vacation.
In Mexico, yes. Why not?
I know it. But no, I think that this is actually something that, interestingly enough, organizations really struggle with. And I think that those
across the board, a lot of organizations, not just tourism, not just DMOs, across the board, I agree with you. I talk to companies all the time, every day, and very few actually spend time like really honing in on this.
Yeah. And I think, even recently, because we've seen a real, I think, growth in our value of tourism program, a lot of tourism organizations wanting to head down this path. And a value of tourism program is often one that's done as a collective. So, there are definitely examples of individual DMOs or CDMOs. So those destination management organizations that are doing it. And, they know their why, but there's a lot of these kind of regional DMOs or even provincial DMOs that you're involving more people. So as the regional DMO, now you're talking to all of your communities and you want them to buy into the program, or as a province. I think those are the interesting ones that we start to see the what's your why. There's a lot of different opinions.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, your why doesn't have to be one thing, but like you certainly all need to be bought in to what is your singular why or your,
Right. There should be an overarching why that everybody agrees upon or agrees on. And then maybe there's some individual whys within the community that all sort of feed up to that collective why, if that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, my encouragement to organizations that are, it's like, take your time.
Right.
Don't be in a rush, because I guarantee your first question that you're going to be asked is, why are you doing this?
Right.
And so if you don't have that solid answer, and Brad from our team actually spends a lot of time with organizations,
including ours,
asking why.
Yeah.
But
this is a great question that not enough people ask, right?
Yeah, but he also, a big part of the value of tourism program up front is we come up with key messages. So what I was going to say is Brad spends a lot of time with organizations working on these key messages, which susses out your why. And so he starts to ask all of those questions, and those are really interesting ways to get the conversation started. And so, initially, why are you doing this? Why now? Why? And, I think there's a few catalysts, and as long as you're able to articulate those things, you're in good shape. And sometimes the why is as simple as recognition for tourism and that piece. And sometimes it's as complicated as funding and destination development and or political or whatever it is. And so it doesn't have to be complicated, but you definitely need to be aligned.
Yeah. And it really, I think the why is sort of really very dependent from a community by community basis as to kind of what is going on from a tourism perspective in that community, right? It could be, we're talking to a community right now where it's like they've never really actively done any kind of tourism marketing or strategy, or really focused on tourism as an industry sort of proactively. So like probably their why is to build a tourism strategy and to start understanding how tourism fits into their community and you know, how people think about it. And whereas others who are like, you know, big tourism destinations that get lots of visitors, it's like, hey, maybe we need to test, you know, how much more we can push and build, or are we at our limit, or right? Like there's so many different whys. So I mean, what are some of the most common whys that you've come across in this work, working with different DMOs and regional DMOs and other organizations?
Yeah, there are a couple. So I think one of the big first ones is around destination development. And so if you think about, you know, I would say there are two mechanisms for destination development. One is the funding. So that's usually through municipal, provincial dollars. So you need to be building a strong case around tourism and why tourism is important to access some of that grant or money or investment from government. So a value of tourism program actually helps you start to articulate that. And there are mechanisms within your value of tourism program that you could focus to activate people to start to tell your government officials. So that's one on the destination development side. The other is just the buy-in to develop. And so you come to some cities. So we know an example in a community that we've worked in where years prior to them kicking off a value of tourism program, there was a referendum to have an arts center built in the city. And that referendum fell. There was not enough support for it. The community didn't understand why that arts center would have been a valuable piece of infrastructure, not only for the community, but for the tourism population and driving more, you know, visitor economy dollars to the thing. So that became for them a big catalyst for, wow, we need to get some more local buy-in, because obviously our local officials believed it enough to get it to this big referendum or this political matter, but it fell at the city. So I think destination development is a common and important one. I think the next often one that I see is around kind of membership and funding. So we talked, I think, in the first episode around hotel tax, MRDT, that piece. So in these provinces in Canada, and I'm sure in other places too, they go through this renewal of funding for their marketing and their destination management organizations. You need that buy-in from the operators, and so it's a way to show value there and to keep that funding either growing or not, able to show that your community buys in to tourism and supports it. There's obviously a nice big green check mark for you as the organization as you're heading in to discuss, you know, renewing your funding with your tourism operators and hoteliers. So that's another one we see. And then I think, you know, thirdly, there's this kind of notion of ambassadors. And I think all of these things in the value of tourism in general lead to ambassadors. But, you know, you are the biggest champion for telling someone to visit your community. So to be empowering people, so that could be your why. We want more people. We want more referral traffic.
Right.
We want more ability.
Or we just want. Sorry, go ahead.
We want more ability to tell the story of our tourism program.
Right. Or we just want to know who's on our side in case it comes to it and things become negative or whatever, or if we
I would say I would say those things touch more on your funding piece, or you're going, right? Like you want enough positive voices in the mix so that if an art center is coming to a referendum, you know you're going to have a pocket of people who don't want that development.
Right.
But your value of tourism program is now going to create a list of people that you know support it, or that piece. And then I think the final piece is, you know, that a little bit softer. Right? Like I'd argue the first two, you know, that first one is about developing your destination. It's about growth. It's about a growth strategy, and we want to go further and harder. So we need to build advocates for that. Your second one is about more of a proof point to your tourism industry that your community is behind you.
Right.
And then your final one is more of this softer, we have a community that loves tourism, and maybe you don't have a big ask of that community, but maybe it's about sussing out more tourism stories. So Joe's fishing or Janet's electric bikes, or being able to tell the very touchy feely, and we know especially Gen Z travelers love those stories. They want to play like a local when they go places, and so being able to create marketing initiatives that connect with them in that really personal way. A value of tourism program can help you find those people.
Yeah, interesting.
Whereas the other two are less about finding your proof points,
right?
More about trying to ensure you have the support you need to continue driving tourism. Whereas the last one is more about, almost finding more innovative ways to market.
Yeah. And I would say underlying all of those whys is really this is just something that I think you and I are both passionate about, is like, being proactive and not letting things happen to you, and having control of your own narrative, and having control over your own, to the extent possible, your own future, right? As a tourism industry, or just tourism stakeholders, or as a group of people interested in tourism, whatever that looks like. At the end of the day, overarching all those whys is like, hey, you care about tourism and you want to see it succeed in your community for whatever reason, whatever mechanisms, whatever. And so I think the more proactive you can be, and the more you can do this value of tourism work, the more you're going to make sure that that actually happens, and you are a driver in that conversation, as opposed to just somebody who's just reacting and having things happen to them.
Yeah, and I'd say I can think of two strong examples of clients we have. I'm not going to name them, obviously, but that exactly that went into circumstances where they thought they had the support of government and the community because they made some assumptions and went in and tried to get funding for some pretty cool tourism initiatives and development, which again, from an assumption-based standard, you'd go, well, why wouldn't we do this? Right. Especially if you're living and breathing tourism, you're like, this is a no-brainer. This, beautification of this, or development of this. And they've gone in, and in one circumstance, the officials said to them, we've never even heard of you before.
Right.
And this is like a major organization that's the spirit, like an association that's spearheading the tourism. It's like, we've never even, like, who are you? You're coming and asking us for money.
Another assumption that people actually know what you do.
Yeah, like we don't know, like who supports you, what? And so like, it's like, that's a why. Hey, we went and did this thing and these people looked at us like we were crazy. So now we're going to go do our value of tourism campaign to prove their support, to prove that, we need your help, to prove that the community is behind us.
Yeah. That's
one thing government officials love. If their constituents want it, they will do
much easier to get them to agree to it, right? Yeah. This kind of point reminds me a lot of like, I see this all the time in politics and in governments, and governments often do this wrong. And I think, tourism and other types of organizations, industry associations often do this wrong too. But it's like, you start proposing solutions to people, and it's like, they didn't even know there was a problem, or there was an issue, or like they didn't know anything about it. And all of a sudden it's like, you're being, it's like this thing's being imposed or whatever, or this ideas are being thrown out, and it completely catches people by surprise. Right. So like, it is a building, it takes building blocks to get there. Right. It's not an overnight thing. And so, this starting with your why, even, previous to that is making no assumptions. It's like why might be because we don't even know what we don't know. So we need to start understanding what we know and what we don't know, and testing those assumptions, and sort of understanding what work needs to be done.
Yeah, we've been really like obsessed lately on the communications team at CIPR about like myth versus fact. Right. So this notion of myth busting. And I think that's like an exercise you could do internally at your boardroom table with your team. Okay, what's like a tourism myth in our community? Because you know them, right? Like you know them. Okay, let's throw all the myths on the wall, and let's start talking about the facts around them. and your why is going to become really obvious, right? Like if you've gone around that boardroom table and all of your myths have to do with like tourism doesn't matter, well, then your why is probably to communicate why tourism matters.
Right.
Or if your myths around the table all have to do with jobs and economy, you can't start a business here. There's no there's this, there's that. It's like, well, your why is probably around the economic impact and development, or it's a really, typically when you do brainstorming with a group or with your company, you want to go positive. All right, let's brainstorm the happy things, but it's like, get your group to, you know, if there's anything you are familiar with, it's like, even yourself, like, you know, the stereotypes about yourself and your personality type, you could throw them all on a wall and then start to think about how to correct those things. Whereas like, you know, it's one thing, like I said, there's one thing to name positive. It's one thing to go around and start naming negative. So if you're really struggling with like, I know I need a value of tourism program, but I'm not sure exactly what the why is, do that. Like it's a fun, you know, make it light, obviously. But it's an interesting place to start from an assumption-based perspective.
Exactly. Nice. And I would just, I guess, maybe close by saying, you know, right now more than ever, we're recording this in May, you know, end of May 2021, right as the, you know, COVID is sort of starting to look like it's been beat by Canadians, but is not yet beat. And so like, we have no idea what the future looks like. And government's been spending money all over the place on things they never expected to spend money on. And you know, it's like anything can happen in the future, and tourism dollars and tourism focus, and, you know, like it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. So I think now more than ever, really getting clear on the why and what, you know, and why you need to really start thinking about value of tourism and starting to protect your interests. You know, there's never been a more important time. So I'll just maybe leave it with that as a final thought.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that too. And just like the big encouragement, we prioritize your whys, right? So like you can walk out with 3 or 4 whys, but like, to your point, look at today, look at the environment. What's the why? And, you know, your why right now, I think about money, right? Like probably everyone's why is around some sort of finance and money or development.
Well, it could be just plain survival of your industry at a level.
And
that's going to sustain your industry going forward, or whatever.
So it's prioritize and be realistic, right? So, you know, this year might not be the year to build the giant water park, but at the same respect, maybe it is.
Right.
So, you know, really prioritize and have those thoughtful conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Nice.
All right. That was step 2. There's 6 steps. So keep listening. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, and Spreaker for the next episode. And comment on our...
comment, and share on our social media channels.
There you go. Thanks, everyone.